Hi, and welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today's guest is Monica. Hi, welcome.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Monica Helvie. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist in California and in Texas. And I provide online services for folks who are struggling with anxiety and
Mhm.
trauma. And the ways that that looks for my particular clients is generally like they're very ambitious or high achieving folks. And so for them, it may not look as obvious to the
Mhm.
folks in their life that they're struggling with anxiety or self-limiting beliefs. But for them, it may look like more of an internal processing of anxiety, just really under the surface. And so those are my peeps, and I love them.
Hey, yeah, it's pretty similar to who I work with. And I mean, I don't know anything about high achieving anxiety. Like,
Right?
no therapist
I
does.
mean, we're therapists. We don't have those struggles, right?
Never. It's not familiar at all.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, I feel like there's a lot of burnout that can happen in this field. And I know that that's something
Yes.
in particular that you have really good experience in and there you could speak a lot on. So I was hoping that today, because I know so many therapists, mm, we get told in grad school stuff along the lines of, oh, self-care is important.
Mhm.
Cool. But what does that mean? And what does that look
Yep.
like? And burnout's a thing in this field. Okay, but
Absolutely.
like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? So I think there's a lot of generalizations that kind of happen through our education. I think some of it is people don't want to talk about it, almost like the boogeyman, like don't say it out loud because it may
Mhm.
happen. Um,
Yeah.
I think some other people don't want to scare newer therapists, but then that means it can catch you off guard if or
Uh-huh.
when it does happen. So there's a lot of things that go with burnout. And I feel like the population you were describing, it like for your clients, there's a lot of people that fit that within the therapy fields, right? I mean, you need a lot of education. So a lot of us are high achieving because of that. And
Mhm.
a lot of us are coming into this field, because we have our own personal experiences with something. And
Absolutely.
that may in some ways make us less likely to share when we're feeling burned out or even understand what that looks like for us. Because like you mentioned earlier, it may look different than it will
Yes.
for people in other professions or other ages or whatever else. So,
Well, and to add to that, there's a lot of shame around it, right? Like if we're
mhm,
struggling with something that maybe our client is struggling with, or that we've seen somebody
yeah,
else, right? There's a lot of shame as therapists sometimes to say like, me too. And
mhm,
it's a very real thing, even in like agency settings, right? Even just like
yeah,
acknowledging it to your supervisor or your boss, right? If this person's gonna sign my hours or report me to the board, right? There's a lot
mhm.
of um, underlying fears that are around speaking about your burnout and getting help for it.
Oh yeah, especially when like those earlier stages of your career, you're trying to sort of prove yourself. And
Mm.
there's a lot of that imposter syndrome anyway. It's
Yep.
really scary to then open up and be like, hey, so I'm sort of struggling here because you don't want to be like, I just started and now I'm looking like I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know how to take care of
Yep.
myself, or any of those things. And it's like burnout can happen anywhere. So,
Yeah.
but especially in the beginning of your career.
Right. And I feel like a lot of the beliefs that people have is that burnout is for those experienced therapists that have been in the field for years, right?
Mhm.
And they've done years and years at agency work. And it's like, um, remember grad school? That was a lot of work too.
Right.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
some therapists are coming into the field with burnout, not
Mhm.
recognizing it or feeling ashamed of speaking about their burnout. And then, I mean, ultimately, what I'm seeing from the research trends is that they're leaving the field entirely.
Yep, I've seen that a lot. I hear it a lot from
Yeah.
people that I know or have worked with, or even seen in like, social circles or social media
Uh-huh.
that a lot of people just want to do something like, I just want to be in a cubicle and like,
Yeah. I
you know,
want to work at
like,
Trader Joe's. Everybody's so happy at Trader
exactly.
Joe's.
Right. They got the best snacks. Like that sounds great.
Yeah.
So I think
For
that's a big
sure.
piece of it. But then
Absolutely.
it's like we shouldn't be talking about when it's at that point, right? Like there's so much work that could be done before we get to the point that it's like, let's quit this thing altogether.
Yeah, yeah. It's truly unfortunate to invest that much time, energy, and like money into your degree or like the hours that it takes to get licensed, and then to just decide to leave the fields because you're like struggling with severe burnout. Like that's tragic for me. When I look at that, when I hear about those
Yeah.
cases, I'm like, that's truly heartbreaking because I understand the legwork that it took to get to that place, and I understand the level of desperation that they're in when they make that decision to ultimately, hit the red button and bail out.
Yeah, it's really sad. And I think if it was talked about more in earlier stages of therapist careers,
Yes.
maybe it wouldn't get to that point later on.
Yes.
So, which I guess it would be helpful then to define kind of what is burnout, because I know that that can be kind of a catch-all for
Yep.
some people. So if you don't mind speaking on kind of a little bit about what burnout is and also what that looks like for therapists in particular.
Yeah. So burnout is essentially like an emotional, physical, mental exhaustion
Mhm.
that's caused by excessive and like prolonged stress. And ultimately, what happens is it affects your resiliency,
Mm,
and your tolerance for like everyday situational stressors becomes even like smaller, right? So particularly for therapists, it can look all different kinds of ways. I mean, everybody's different, right? Some folks, again, may look really high functioning burnout.
mhm.
They may be the CEOs, they may be the agency directors, they may have all the fancy titles or letters after their name. But for them, it may look like brain fog. It may look like at the end of the day, they're doing mindless scrolling, right?
Mm,
It may look like snapping at their family when they get home, right? And for other folks, it could just be task avoidance, procrastination, right? Like putting off those notes, like, not logging in to do those CEs, like just
yeah.
like the little task avoidance situations. Um, but one of the things that really like stands out to me is one of the highest consequences of burnout is that for a lot of people, again, no matter where you are on the scale, what it ultimately does, because you have a decreased resiliency for stressors, what we as therapists, we're sitting and holding space for big
Mhm.
feelings. And so if we have a decreased ability to hold that space, what happens therapeutically in the clinical room in this space is we begin to emotionally and physically withdraw, right?
Yeah.
We disconnect, and which makes us sometimes less compassionate or empathetic, and really kind of less safe for our clients
Yeah.
that we're doing work with. Um, so that's one of the things that I think is like the most costly is to burnout is that it can look like this emotional or physical shutdown or withdrawal and disconnection. And with that disconnection, again, consistently, and if it's happening chronically for a long period of time,
Mhm.
um, we may feel very disconnected from our work. We may feel very like misaligned, right? Like we're not getting as much feeling of meaningfulness or purposefulness in the work, right? So we may show up a little bit less like excited to do the work. We're more resentful about doing the work. We're a little bit more crabby or irritated about the asks from our supervisors. And so again, it just starts to look like after the disconnect is really, you'll start to see the anger show up, right? The resentment show up.
Yeah. And that can be harmful to even the people around us.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
because
Loved ones. Yes.
that
Mhm.
makes sense though, because you're going to see it in the therapeutic space. But I love that some of the examples you gave are not, they're slow and they're slow growing. It's not
Uh-huh.
these big dramatic things, because it's almost like if you Google burnout, right, you're going to see all those stock images of people like this
Yeah.
and people like that,
Right.
you know?
Agonizing. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like all this
Yeah.
dramatic pain and,
Uh-huh.
exasperation and
Uh-huh.
whatever.
Mhm.
But when you said task avoidance, that's something I've heard from a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
So it's finding those ways to like avoid the job that is causing you burnout, even if it's like on an unconscious level that it's
Yep.
causing it.
Hmm. Yeah. And then conversely, like on the other side of that, sometimes there's
Mhm.
like that urgency. Like I can't turn it off. I've got to hurry up and get all these things done. I'm going to bring it home with me. Right. Like, so there could be the avoidance or the
Mhm.
procrastination, but then you got to make it up somehow. Right. Someone's got to sign these notes. So I got to hurry up.
Right.
Right. So it can really, again, exacerbate what's happening internally.
Definitely. And like you said, it's going to affect your work too, how you react, maybe even what the client's picking up on. And
Yes. This is the one thing I really want to drive home, folks. Like, your burnout is not a private situation that nobody's going to know about.
Mhm.
It's going to show. And you can't heal what you don't acknowledge, right? We say this to our clients all the time.
Mhm.
And one of the things with burnout, again, because of the disconnection, you may not be aware of how much it's showing up in the space.
Yep.
But again, it energetically may show up as like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to talk about that thing. Let's stay really up on the surface. Let's not go deep into these things. Let's not look
Mhm.
at these deeper patterns, right? Like we're avoiding some of the deeper work.
Yep.
And ultimately, like we're in the middle of a mental health crisis here. Like we can help ourselves out of that, I think, if we take some of our power and say, like, how can I show up more spacious? How
Mhm.
can I really do really excellent clinical work? Right.
Yeah.
And we just can't if we're disconnected. We just can't if we're emotionally unavailable and not spacious. Right. If we're sending these subconscious messages of like, don't go there. I don't want to take a report today. Right. Like
Yeah.
it's
No,
going to affect the quality of your work.
definitely. And I think that that makes a lot of sense too, like you were mentioning with grad school, is there's so many directions you're being pulled in grad school,
Yeah.
whether it's with your internships and you're trying to figure out what the requirements are for there and how to do those things, or practicums. And then making sure your work is done, making sure that you're making those connections with colleagues, making sure you're a good, daughter, sibling, whatever
Hmm.
those other roles are, and you're
Absolutely.
figuring it all out at the same time. Plus, I think early career therapists, which is so ironic, but they get some of like the heaviest caseloads. You get the
Uh-huh.
clients who are the most in crisis, and
Yeah.
you get the
Yeah.
clients who seasoned therapists don't want to see necessarily, or they feel like they've paid their dues. So
Uh-huh.
kind of leading it with some of those examples, what have you seen or noticed that has caused burnout for therapists or early in their careers, but also later on too?
Well, I may have a little bit of a controversial approach, or maybe not as talked about approach. I think a lot of the times we do want to say that what causes burnout is those environmental stressors, right?
Mhm.
Is the disproportion of clients' need to therapist available. It is, the systemic issues with insurance. It is the
Yeah.
systemic issues with like I think a lot of the times that we want to sort of divert our attention to those issues and
Mhm.
and speak about those things. And I think it's great. We have to. But I think it's a little bit disempowering to us as clinicians to look at the environmental stressors as being the cause of the burnout.
Mhm.
So I want to sort of shift the power back to the clinicians who are listening today and just say that your burnout is caused by a balance of environmental stressors and internal stress.
Mhm.
And and we become less tolerant and resilient to the environmental stressors when internally we have unprocessed stuff, right? When we
Mhm.
are holding so much unprocessed internal stress from childhood, from undergrad, from grad, like throughout our life, um, those limiting beliefs, those trauma experiences, when they have been unprocessed and we're just holding them,
Yeah.
that those are sort of, again, have you seen that like the jar and they put the big ball, like the big rocks in, and then the little rocks and then
Yeah.
the sand, right? Those are those big rocks, right? They take
Mhm.
up a lot of our spaciousness. They run unconsciously and subconsciously in the background 24/7, and we are
Right.
with ourselves everywhere we go. So we can't just say it's, the agency, or it's this particular clinic or that particular grad school. I really want to just say, shift the focus and shift the power internally and say, what am I bringing that's
Right.
causing and leading me to experience burnout? What am I coming in with? What rocks am I showing up with that is limiting my spaciousness and capacity?
That's a really good point though, because I think that there's a comparison that everybody has, right? So even if it is the agencies contributing, if
Hmm.
you're sitting there and you're going, but these other two people are fine. Like they
Uh-huh.
don't look like they feel like I do. Then
Yeah.
now it's going to create even more insecurity,
Yeah.
more, I guess stress and fear around talking about your burnout when other people maybe are handling those environmental factors better.
Hmm.
So there's got to be an internal piece there. And I think that, some grad school programs stress like do your own therapy or work on
Ah.
yourself. And, I think that that's great if there's the time for it. And sometimes there's
Or resources or money, or right. Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So there's a lot of that, but I think it's helpful I think sometimes people are criticizing themselves so much as a therapist when they're starting
Mhm.
to feel that burnout, especially early on, instead of maybe really looking at what can I work on for myself? Maybe those factors they can't
Yes.
control. And maybe they can't control some of those external ones, like you were mentioning, but there may
Mhm.
be some of the internal ones that they can work on to combat some of the burnout.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I hear a lot of folks with burnout say is like, but I don't have time. I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And it's sort of like, even like with exercise, right? We're like, just 20 minutes a day, 10 minutes
Mhm.
outside, like start where you can.
Yep.
That is the biggest thing. Start where you can. If you are experiencing severe burnout and you're like, I literally don't have no money, I don't have no
Right.
time, I can't do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
listen to some podcasts, right? Like,
Mhm.
what can you do? Can you get a book on burnout? Could you start becoming aware of like your limiting beliefs? Like, what can you start doing right here where you are today? What resources do you have right here today that you can start doing something about this? Because
Yeah.
doing nothing about it, it's not really an option when you're a clinician.
No.
Again, you're holding space for somebody else. Like, I want to take that one off the table. It's a non-choice, right?
Yeah. But I like how you say, because that was going to be my next question is like, what steps can therapists take so that they don't get to this point that they're like, Trader Joe's, here I come. you
I'm
know,
getting one for you. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, those discounts are tempting, but like, let's like try not to go there unless you're actually shopping. Like, don't switch your career to there, please. Not yet.
Well,
So,
and again, we take ourselves everywhere we go, right? So if
mhm,
you are burning yourself out at the
yeah,
clinic, you're gonna burn yourself out at Trader Joe's.
true. Yeah, there's gonna be something with
There'll be
stocking,
something. Yes.
scheduling.
Yes,
Like,
something will be
right.
intolerable and overwhelming because again, it's about a spaciousness issue, right? Something
Yeah.
something is leaking. There's an energy leak. There's something that's misaligned. Something that is plugged in that needs to be plugged out, right? Like there's
Mhm.
something that's going on here that needs to be addressed
Yeah.
so that you can have more spaciousness to do whatever the work is that you decide to do.
Right.
Um, so to answer your question, the steps that therapists can take to prevent burnout. So again, my steps are going to be tactical. There's something that you can do about it, but also don't sleep on them. They sound simple, but don't sleep on them. All right.
Yeah.
So, because they're hard. So, the first thing that I would say is like be honest and clear with
Mhm.
yourself about what you want, what you need, and what you desire. One of the things that I see with burnout a lot is that, again, because there's this disconnect from ourself, um, we lose touch with what we want,
Mm,
right? Like, what is my ideal work schedule? And we just start saying yes to anybody who calls, or we just start saying yes to those evening appointments, even though we don't want to do them,
right.
right? Because burnout, the more burnout you are, the like your boundaries will start to like
Mhm.
show like less and less, right? Um, so if you come into this field and you're really clear on what you need, what you value, what you want, what your ideal work-life balance is, start off there. I don't think we do enough to teach young therapists to do that.
Mhm.
We talk to them about it when they go into private practice. Okay, what do you want your schedule to be now?
Exactly. Mhm.
But these younger therapists have a choice. They get to decide where they want to work. They get to decide what clinic setting, what speed they want to get their hours, which populations they want to work with. And sometimes we say like less about that and we just tell them, go over here, you'll get a lot of experience really quick working with a very diverse group of people, aka agency, mental health.
Right.
And we're going to give you a smattering of everything that's going to make
Mhm.
you get really clear, really fast what you don't want to work with.
True.
But knowing what you don't want to do isn't the same thing as knowing what you do want to do.
Mhm.
Right. So if
Yep.
we can like be really honest and clear with ourselves about where we are coming into the field, I'm already noticing some burnt out.
Mm.
I'm burnt out and like, I don't know that that's going to be where I can do my best work right now. Okay. Why isn't that okay? Like what we
Yeah.
should be celebrating that, honoring that. Good for you for knowing your boundaries and limits at
Mm.
the beginning, you know? So I really say like it starts with that, like being aware of what you're coming in with, knowing what you've got. If you've never done any mental health therapy for yourself, like noticing that about yourself and saying like, maybe I don't want to start with tier 3, clients in a hospitalized setting, right? Like maybe that's going to be a little
True.
much for me. Maybe I need to do a little bit of like my own emotional maturity, like growing into myself and knowing myself first.
Mhm.
And maybe it is right for me to start in a private practice setting to get that experience because it's slower and it's more, in tune with my nervous system needs, right?
Mhm.
That should be allowed.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think there's so much judgment that comes with that from other therapists
Yes,
times. I mean,
so much.
almost often.
Professors, yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh,
Professors too.
you're gonna go to private practice. Why?
So bougie.
Don't you? Yeah, don't you want to work with people who really need your help?
Mhm. Is that why you got into this field? Private practice is full of, like, rich people who are
Yeah,
privileged and
the
don't have
worried
problems.
well. Yeah, the worried
Mhm.
well. let me tell you, I have worked with some severely, severely traumatized individuals in private practice,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't accept insurance. So I just want to say, like, you're going to be able to get the experience that is right for you when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when you are spacious for it, you'll be able to tolerate whatever comes at you,
Yep.
right? You'll be able to say, like, with certainty, like, yeah, this is the right person for me, and I can hold what they're bringing to me because this is the right story. This is the right severity for me.
Mhm. Yeah. And people aren't told that. I know I wasn't in school. It wasn't about me at all. It was supposed to be about what you can serve, like who you can serve,
Yes.
what you're bringing, what theory are you coming from. It was like so much about the technicalities, almost nothing about like my emotions in the
No.
therapy room.
And sometimes you're told to just like be a blank slate.
Yes. Oof.
Don't bring any of
Yes.
that.
That's the
Don't
worst.
bring any of you there, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
again, I don't know how to not be in that room. Like, I'm in the room, right? You want me to
Exactly.
dissociate? Like, I don't understand that.
No, it doesn't make sense. And that can lead to more burnout sometimes too, if you're feeling like you're not yourself in some of the sessions.
Yes.
If you're coming in like very forced, you're on the entire time,
Hmm.
you're almost like playing the role of a therapist instead of being your
Yeah.
authentic self, that can create faster burnout because
Yes.
there's no authenticity there for you.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because again, when we are contorting ourselves to like fit into a box that's not
Mhm.
us, right? It's my supervisor really likes this approach, so I got to do these
Yes.
interventions so I can put it in my note, right? And we're trying to contort ourselves, like you said. There's such an internal misalignment,
Mm-hmm.
right? That creates that disconnect, right? And it absolutely will take you in that direction. But notice that this is going to kind of jump ahead a little bit, but notice that the pattern that sometimes allows us to do those things, to choose those
Mm-hmm.
behaviors, sometimes is coming from a people pleaser place, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
part of us that wants to get the attaboy from our supervisor, that wants to get the recognition, like, wow, like you did so good in that video that we put on in the group discussion in class today. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we want that, we crave that, we need that. We're human, right?
Right.
And but so those underlying beliefs or those processes that are at play there are a lot of the times the things that are taking up all that spaciousness in your jar and guiding you towards the inevitable end of burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's really tough that I love how you keep saying aligned because I feel like that was something that was also not really addressed at
Oh yeah,
all in
no.
my program, at least. And a lot of therapists, I feel like, don't hear that concept till years later.
Hmm.
And that's something that's definitely important because I think that you're right. If there's a misalignment, you're going to have a speedy track to burnout. And
Yeah.
it's usually some of the stuff that's going on with our work is going to parallel stuff in our lives and vice versa. So if you're having that misalignment in your job, it's very likely that things are going to start becoming misaligned at home or in your other relationships.
Yep. Yep. It's that slippery slope for sure. And that's why I say, like, step one is like, get really clear, get really honest,
Yeah.
know what you want, know where your alignment is, like, know what
Mhm.
your home base is. You'll be so much more aware of when you start to depart from it, so that you can bring yourself back, as opposed to just starting misattuned and then trying to find your way back to center. Like, that's way harder.
Mhm.
And something that I wish more clinicians knew, I wish I knew when I was a younger clinician. Like you said, like, it wasn't something we were taught. We were
Mm-mm.
taught to attune more to the other, to the
Yes.
client, or to our supervisor, or to the clinic's needs, and we weren't really taught how to start here first.
No, at all that I can think of in my program. It was just kind of like bend and pull and break
Uh-huh.
and whatever needs to happen to be able to be there for the client and meet them where they're at. And all of these like
Yes.
phrases that they make sense, but the way that they're sometimes used or manipulated can make you feel like you're failing if you're not doing those
Yes.
things. Or if you're
Yes,
feeling
absolutely.
like you're struggling with doing
Yeah.
those
Or you're
things.
not doing enough for them,
Yeah,
or like you're not bringing enough to the table to help them get well, right?
exactly.
Yes, totally. Well,
Oh,
so my second step would be take radical responsibility for where you are and where you want to go. Again,
mm,
noticing where are you in your
mhm,
burnout and where do you want to go, right? If you want to have, if your vision of a good work-life balance, career balance is that you say you want to stay in agency. Okay.
yeah.
How do you conceptualize doing that and not being burnt out? Like, what does that look like for you? What
Mhm,
role do you have? What do you take on? What do you say no to? Right? Knowing the requirements of that job there, what do you need to say yes and no to? I will, I have a colleague that I worked with at an agency, and she was somewhat branded as not a team player
Mm,
because she was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to run that group. I'm not proficient in that subject. No.
yeah. Wow. What an icon.
Right? With like radical, like, no, I can't do that. That's outside my scope. And you're
Yeah.
asking me to do something that I don't feel comfortable with. Like,
Mm,
but there was definitely like, ooh, she's a maverick, right? Like, wow,
mhm.
that's so I don't know. It was not the, again, she was not the going with the flow kind of a clinician. And so, but if that is what you are clear of inside
Mhm.
yourself, it'll be so much easier for you to stand in that. Like, no, my no is my no. And I'm sorry that you are struggling with that. But like, I can be a team player in other ways. I can do
Mhm.
other things, but I'm not going to do that. Right. Like
Mhm.
being able to take responsibility for where you are. And that's going to be able to be, you'll be more effective at that if you're already clear and honest with yourself about like step one. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like I said, there are always going to be these systemic issues, these bigger issues that need to be corrected and fixed. But like I said, I really want clinicians to like step back into their power
Mhm.
and acknowledge, yes, the system's broken, but what am I coming in with? What can I be doing differently? What stories am I telling myself here?
Mhm.
Am I saying I'm not doing enough for the clinic? Am I saying that I have to do it perfect, in order to get, before I hit submit on these notes, like, what am I saying? What qualities, beliefs do I have that are going to cause me and my nervous system to constrict and tighten and feel unsafe and threatened and
Mhm.
like I have to perform, right? That inevitably will propel you towards that burnout.
Oh, I love how you said nervous system too, because that's it. It has such an effect on our
Yeah.
bodies. It's like not even just our minds. I mean, I've
Yeah.
known people, and I feel like there's been a few times I've had this too in the past where you almost feel like physically ill. If there's a certain situation,
Yes.
I know that before I really found my voice, I would read like the intake paperwork for a client or somebody that I was like, I have no idea how to deal with a 4-year-old with trauma. I've only worked with adults. And now
Yeah.
community mental health, they're like, here's a 4-year-old. And I'm like, oh
Mhm.
my God, like I can throw up. I don't know how to help them. What if I don't do the right thing? And like a
Right.
physical reaction where
Mhm.
then later in life I learned like having that same reaction. I remember they were trying at a place I worked, they were trying to give me a client who had committed like severe animal abuse. And that's
Mm.
a deal breaker for me. I can
Yeah.
handle almost anything but animal stuff.
Yeah.
Cannot. So I was like, "No, I'm not seeing them." And they were like, "What do you
Yes.
mean?" I was like, "I'm not going to see this person. I already know what happened. I see, the little synopsis or whatever of who they're going to be. No, I'm not doing that. There's a bunch of other clinicians here. They can see someone else." And
Yes.
there was some pushback. And I was like, I don't care. I'm not doing it. I am not the right fit for them. I can tell you right now, if they're creating this reaction in me, it's not going to be a good fit for their mental health. So no, but
Yes.
it took time to get there.
Right. And this is where I'm saying, like, again, I really wish that we could empower newer clinicians coming into the field with that same, like, yeah, no, you don't have to say yes to everyone.
And
Not
trust your
everyone
gut.
is gonna, yes, not everyone is gonna be the right fit for you.
Hmm.
You're not gonna be everybody's cup of tea either. And just because they say like it's not a fit, I need to work with somebody else, doesn't mean there's anything bad or deficient in you,
Hmm.
right? Or that you have to contort again to be the right therapist for this person that you don't even like. You
No.
know?
Yeah. And that
There's somebody who loves that person. Let them do
exactly.
that work. Yeah.
Right. There's going to be somebody for everybody, just like they say with dating. Like it's like
Yeah.
that in the therapy world too. So somebody else will see that client and they don't have the same feelings about that issue like I do. And they'll be a great fit for them and
Yes.
they can hopefully get better with them. But like, I'm not it. But again, in the beginning with that 4-year-old, there was probably people who I worked with that would have been a great fit for them. And I didn't know
Mm.
how to advocate then or trust that gut. That was like, this is probably not within your scope of practice at this point in time.
Yeah.
Ask for
Not
more
yet.
training. You kind of wish you could go back in time and be
Yes.
like, tell them you need more training with children before you work with them. Tell them this. But it's like you
Yes.
said, you want to be like the perfect student. You want to get your hours. You want to get like the great reviews for your board every quarter or whatever your
Yep.
state requires. And I think, when you talk about alignment, that's something I really wish I knew early on, because I feel like I wouldn't have struggled in certain settings, or with myself maybe in those settings as much as I did had somebody spoken to me about how important that was, like the personal aspects of it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's everything. I
Yeah.
think like it's so huge. Like you attuning to yourself, um, connecting with yourself, taking care of yourself,
Hmm.
that is going to help you do exceptional clinical work, right? But
Yep.
we don't know that or trust that yet, when we're new. And so I can't speak enough about like, you don't have to have this baptism by fire kind of approach to like getting your experience. Like you can grow into your experience. You don't like, I remember being like, I want to work with a lot of different people from a lot of different areas,
Hmm.
just to kind of figure out what I want and what I don't want. Right. But
Right.
again, that was very much other focused and not attuning to, like you said, like me, like I want to work in a hospitalized setting. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be it for me. Right. Like, and had I known that and asked myself that question first, it may have
Hmm.
informed some of the decisions early on in my career. So,
Yeah.
and so the last step that I would say to clinicians, to protect themselves from burnout is do the work, right? We say
Hmm.
this like get in therapy, do the work, and ideally with somebody who's not severely burnt out.
That'd be great. Because then it's like, oh, me too. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, wait, now it's a blind leading the blind. Hold on.
Yes. And oh my gosh, I've sat in those sessions. I've been in those sessions with my
Yeah.
therapist where they're like, yeah, isn't it tough right now? And it's like a like we're colluding in each other's misery, which is like, cool, this is validating. And also like, is there ever a light at the tunnel? Like, am I ever going to get out of this? Is there any way out of this? Right.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say, like, if you've been in those situations in therapy before where you've gotten more of the, yeah, welcome to the club,
Mhm.
kind of approach, right? Then maybe that ain't it.
Right.
You can love them dearly and they can have a lot of good information to share with you. But at this time, again, when you think about regulating your nervous system, it takes a regulated other to bring you into regulation.
Mhm.
That's what we're supposed to be doing as therapists, right? We are the
Yeah.
regulated other, and we help send out messages of safety and
Mhm.
care and empathy. And that helps the other person to attune and regulate back.
Right.
So if you're sitting as the client, and I know a lot of therapists struggle to find their own therapy. So, but again, if you are sitting in the chair as not the therapist, as the client, and you are
Mhm.
aware that you aren't getting those messages from your practitioner, then it may be time to find somewhere else to go.
Agreed. I would
Okay.
say the same
No
with
thing.
supervisors.
Yes. Yes. That was going to be one of my tips. Yes,
Yes.
for sure. You can find outside supervision. Like
Mhm.
you can work with the agency supervisor that you need to work with, in order to get your hours and everything
Yeah.
else. And you can also hire somebody or go outside on your own and find a therapist who offers supervision, who's
Mhm.
more spacious, who's maybe more able to help you dive into those cases a little bit deeper. Just because they don't have 30 clinicians, maybe that they're trying to help with all their 60 cases, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I would definitely say, you know, in order to really protect yourself from burnout, you really, really, really need to identify and heal the parts of you that are holding on to those limiting beliefs, the parts of you that
Mhm.
are having and holding that dysregulation. Um, when you can, again, shift inwards, notice what's going on there, take responsibility for that, heal that, then you're going to be able to kind of step out of those patterns that maybe your inner critic might lead you to. The voice
Right.
that says you're not doing enough, you need to sign up for this, you need to offer, right? You might be able to silence that voice or that perfectionistic part that says like, we really have to work on this report really late, we have to finish this assessment really late tonight.
Yeah.
You might be able to like silence and soften those voices a little bit more if you've been able to identify and heal their stories. So yeah, those are my tips.
Yeah, no, that makes
Those are my
sense.
steps. Yeah.
And so, is there anything additionally that you could think of specifically for the newer therapist? You mentioned supervision paying for outside of it, which outside supervision if possible, which I think is so helpful because I know in a lot of the community mental health settings or agency settings, there is typically one or two supervisors for everybody. And it's a little tricky sometimes when your supervisor is also the person who like pays you
Uh-huh.
and potentially like there's a lot of boundary stuff that sometimes can happen if it's not the healthiest place or person. So I think that's a huge one. Anything else in particular for newer therapists that you could think of?
Hmm. Yeah, I think, like I said, it's really going to come back to if you can know and identify your stories. If you are aware of your big and little T traumas, right?
Mhm.
And you've had some support with unpacking those, you're going to be trusting yourself more to make those decisions. Like, do I go outside? Do I need to bring somebody else in? Do I need to say no to this? Like, I really think that that's a game changer. Like, I
Mhm.
think that that's like, it's like ground zero. It starts there. That's like the foundational thing that needs to be done before any of the other like tasky things can be done.
Mhm.
Because again, if you don't trust yourself to make that decision, or if you're struggling with like, well, I don't really want to offend them, or I don't want my supervisor to be mad at me for getting another supervisor, that's all internal belief stuff. And
Yeah.
it may impair you from doing the very thing that you need to do if you don't heal it first. So that's where I really say, like, that's the game changer right there. And so, like I said,
Mhm.
they're gonna be like easy steps, but not easy because there's a lot of work in each of these steps. Like being honest, taking responsibility, doing the work, like there's a lot that's in each of those steps.
Mhm.
That will help you to really protect yourself from arriving at burnout. It there's things that you can do, right? Like these self-care strategies that we hear all the time, right? But I really think that those are more like um, rebounds for your nervous system,
Mm, mhm.
right? Like those are just like general maintenance, right? To rebound your nervous system back into like some neutral.
Yeah.
When you have burnout, like at a deep way, you'll notice like taking that vacation isn't going to be restorative,
Mhm.
right? Because you're still thinking about work, or you're still checking your emails, or you're still worried about coming back and noticing the stack of cases or whatever on your desk. Like,
Mhm.
so those self-care things are great things, and we need to be doing those. Drink your water,
Right.
eat, take a bathroom break, walk, get outside, like do all of those things. Those are huge protective things to do, but they are more like rebounds. They're not going to be the things that really deeply heal your nervous system and deeply help you not arrive at burnout. Those are going to be just like general healthy coping skills. In general, we should be doing
Yeah.
those things. Does
They're
that
not
make
hitting
sense?
the core. Mhm.
Yeah, they're helping you to be resilient, but they're not necessarily helping you to sustain a lifestyle in this career. Make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds like what you're saying too is like the earlier in your career that you can work on the you stuff, the
Yes.
better path you're going to be on. Because if you can get in alignment, you can understand, like you said, big T, little t, you can understand all of these different traumas, these
Mhm.
different personality quirks and
Mhm.
preferences, people pleasing behaviors. If you can get a better understanding of yourself early on in your career, you may not even have to hit burnout. That is not like a
Yes.
milestone or like a badge of honor. Like some
Yes.
people carry it, like, which is insane.
Uh-huh.
But some people do. I've worked in places where people have been like, "Huh, yeah, I'm burned out." Like it's like praise
Yeah.
that they're working harder than the rest of us or something.
I mean, have you been on social media and seen all the like, haha, funny burnout therapists? Like, yeah, we live off coffee and no sleep. And like, literally, you sit back to back in sessions for 10 hours and you tell people about how to be healthy and regulated and take care of themselves,
Mhm.
and you don't do it.
No, that's so
Right? Like,
hypocritical.
yeah, but it leads to that disconnect. It leads to that
It does.
misalignment. And the clinician, there's no way your brain doesn't hear you saying, you should really be doing this for you, but I don't do this for me.
Mhm.
Right? And your brain's just sitting back like, really?
Judging.
Yeah. Inner critic is like having a
Yep.
field day in there, like, oh
Exactly.
wow, really? And
Yeah.
it starts that internal, like that wrenching in your soul. And it just
Mhm.
eventually leads to this like, wow, why am I even doing this? Why am
Yeah.
I tolerating this? This isn't me, right? Because you have that severance that
Mhm.
has just slowly over time just worn you down.
Yeah. So I think like overall, you said a lot of really, really good tips. And it sounds like basically the earlier the better. Don't wait till you're feeling
Yeah.
some burnout. Don't wait until it's almost like vitamins, right? Like if I only took
Yeah.
vitamins when I was already sick, it's probably not going to do that much for me.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
if I'm taking them like on a daily basis, then maybe I won't get sick, or if I do, it won't be as bad.
Yes.
So it's like taking those preventative steps by understanding who you are as a person first before you then put on the therapy hat.
Yes,
Sounds like something.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you use that analogy with the supplements. The one that I use is like, if you try to throw like a vacation or a spa day or a Starbucks run at your burnout, that's like
Yeah.
taking Tylenol when you have a broken bone.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna do
Right.
much. It's too
No.
far too gone, right? Like you need an actual intervention. You need actual correction and resetting of that bone. Like
Yep.
there needs to be a recalibration. And
Mhm.
so, if you're already noticing you're experiencing burnout, don't throw some vitamins at it. Like,
Mhm.
well, you needed the vitamins a long time ago, but you might, at
Seriously.
that point, if you're coming into the field with the burnout,
Mhm.
you might be noticing like, oh shoot, I'm already like beyond the phase. Like I'm in that like medium toasty, burnt out. I'm not
Yep.
severely toasty, but I'm like medium.
Mhm.
Then I would say like you've got to get into good supervision or good clinical work with somebody who's not experiencing burnout, who can hold the spaciousness for you and help you get to what is at the core driving this for you.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. It's like you wanna seek out the people who are where you wanna be. So if you're finding a therapist, you're like, "Oh, okay, look at like some of her website copy. This is speaking to me. Like she
Yeah.
seems on the other side of this. You do the intake and she or he is very healthy." And you're like,
Yes.
"Okay, like this is working for me."
They have
Um,
good boundaries,
yes.
right? They won't see you at the end of your day at 8 p.m. or I don't know, whatever. Maybe there's people
Exactly.
that love working at night, but you know what I'm saying? Like if they
Yeah,
have good boundaries and they
right.
have, they're communicating clearly, those are all signs like, oh, they returned my phone call.
Yes. Right.
Sign, right? Like
Yep.
little things can be a really clear green flag or red flag. So
True. Yeah. And I think that's so helpful to know because a lot of times people don't understand that. Like those
yeah,
things again aren't talked about enough. So it's like you want to make sure your therapist is healthy too, if you have one. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
uh, well, you gave so much good information today. I'm like, oh my God, especially certain keywords like nervous system and alignment. I'm like, yes, like
Oh,
you're
that's my
addressing it.
jam. That is my jam.
I love it though, because it's all
Yeah.
aspects. It's like that whole person
Yes.
approach, right? It's like a more holistic way of looking at it instead of just like, let's look at the symptoms and address them one by one. Oh, like you need to relax, get more sleep. You need, like that's what it
Oof.
feels like a lot of
You're
self
gonna send me off on a whole new thing.
care.
Yeah. No, our symptoms are a signal of something else going on. We
Yep.
have to get curious about that, right? Like
Mhm.
your symptoms, all the unwanted behaviors, if you're procrastinating, if you have brain fog, if you're disconnecting and not going, to emotionally connect with your partner or your loved ones, if you're snapping at your kids, those are all alarm bells
Yep.
trying to get your body's trying to get your attention to drop in and notice like where are we out of alignment? Where are we misattuned? What's coming up for me that I'm feeling this dysregulated or unsafe, right?
Mhm.
So that's a huge way that I work with my clients is holistic and bottom up. And yeah, so that's my jam. So don't
Yeah.
get me going.
That's part two.
I'll be here another hour. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be part two, legit. But yeah, I think that all of that's really helpful. And I like that you gave practical tips too, and not just the cookie cutter things you always see with burnout, because
Yeah.
it's especially when it doesn't work. And typically, like you said, depending on your state of burnout, it won't work. Um,
Nope.
then you feel even more like a failure and more
Yes.
burned out. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that you got to different layers of burnout, how to prevent it. But then also, if you're here, these are
Yep.
some of the things that you can do, and let's reset because we need you in the fields. We need all of the new people. We need all the ones who are here. Like Trader Joe's will have their employees. Like we need more people in mental health.
Retirement is a great time to look into Trader Joe's. Okay, but
True.
you paid a lot for that piece of paper
Yep.
that qualifies you to do this work, and you continue to show up and invest so much in your education and your learning and your growing. Your life experiences could be so impactful to somebody on the other side of you if you could
Mhm.
just learn how to sustain this work. And
Right.
so it is so vital that we do this, especially if we want to make a difference in the
Mhm.
mental health crisis. Like especially, which I don't know a single therapist that would be watching a therapy, talk podcast like
Right.
or YouTube that is like, I want to be a bad therapist. Like I
Yeah.
just don't know that person. Um, so like if your audience is listening, like they want to do exceptional clinical work and they want
Mhm.
to be able to like thrive in their career and it's possible, But it's not going to be possible if you're living in misalignment and you're living in disconnect and you're unaware and you're unacknowledging of what's going on, right?
Mhm.
Again, you can't heal what you're not acknowledging. So
Exactly. And it's going to spiderweb out into other parts of your life too. It may be the most noticeable in your career, but that's not where it's going to stop.
no, it'll always generalize.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for all the tips and the way you've conceptualized the concept of it. I think that that's been
Mhm.
really helpful because again, it's something that can be so vague, but it's like you conceptualize it in a way that makes sense and you
Yeah.
explain symptoms and how it shows up and just things that I feel like was really thorough and
Yeah.
something very concrete for people to take away instead of the typical, like I said, take a bath, like
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Go get your nails done. Go for a walk. I'm like,
Exactly.
yeah, and like
Right, like, that's
Tylenol.
Tylenol,
Yeah.
but that's really not, like, the core, you're not actually hitting it, so,
Yeah, for
ugh,
sure. Good. I'm glad it was helpful.
yeah. Well, is there anything else that you're working on or that you wanna promote or anything you've got going on right now?
Yeah. So I have a wait list that I have growing right now for
Okay.
the next round of Hope for Healers, which is my 5-week intensive masterclass for therapists
Awesome.
to work on doing this very thing, like
Mhm,
identifying and healing, like what is at the root that is driving them to burnout.
mhm.
We'll look at the nervous system 101. So if you're not
Nice.
familiar with polyvagal, I take a really holistic approach. I look at the ways nutrition is impacting your dysregulation in your body. And we talk about, like, again, regulation skills that will actually work depending
Mm,
on where you are at in the state of your nervous system and what's going on for you. And my hope is really that the clinicians that come to do this work with me will really like leave with some big ahas, the big ticket, like I know what my big things are that I need to, it's going to be long-term work, but
yeah.
I want you to be able to say, like, I am very clear on where I may get, derailed, or where I may start to depart and disconnect, so that they can be conscious as they're making these decisions and as they're making these choices for themselves throughout their career. That is my biggest hope, is I want to see excellent clinicians stay and be able to sustain this work. And so that's why I've created this program, is really just to help those folks. And so I
Mm,
have a wait list on my website, and I have a freebie download for your audience. So it's
yay.
how to diagnose if trauma is running your practice. And
Oh,
so, yeah, so super fun.
yeah.
I love a good quiz. Um, and it is not a diagnostic tool. Okay.
Mhm.
We're not diagnosing anybody from this. It's just a little thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also available on my website.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will link to everything below so everybody can follow
Perfect.
your social, look at your website, and kind of see
Yeah.
what you've got going on because
Yeah.
sounds
Follow
like
me.
there's a lot of good, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff coming out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's so awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time
Yes.
out today and sharing your expertise and your knowledge with the audience. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and for making this platform available to clinicians who are coming into this work, because it is so needed. We need sort of like a crash course, right? That's not terrifying, but that is honest,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
For young therapists. And so I love that you're doing this, and I fully support you. So thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
No, I appreciate it. I wish, I created this because it's what I would have used and
Yeah.
really needed, and kind of
Yeah.
everybody else would have. So I don't know
Yep.
that there's enough honest, real approaches to what it is we do, all the layers of it. It's either
Hmm.
I feel like very slanted to be very good or very
Hmm.
bad. And it's all the things all the
Yeah.
time.
All the
So
time. Yeah.
let's figure out what it looks like and how to make it better if
Yeah.
possible.
How to
So
make it work for you too.
exactly. Again, the
Yeah.
alignment. Keyword of the day.
I'm a little woo.
I love it though. And again, that's stuff that I feel like it's holistic. It needs to be addressed. There's a lot there that it's important. And like you said, we need to keep good clinicians in the field. We want people
Yes.
to use their experiences and be the best version of themselves so that they can bring that to the therapy space and help clients. And then
Absolutely.
all just kind of reverberates. But
Yep.
well,
For sure.
for the audience, if you guys want to subscribe below and continue to stay up to date with what's going on my channel. But until next time, see ya. Bye.
Bye.